Hi and welcome. Today I'll be talking about AspNetCore and Prometheus. Prometheus is an awesome tool to get your metrics out of AspNetCore, so you can actually start tracking your app and see how it's running over time. So I've made this small GitHub repository actually explaining it all, and this will just be a YouTube clip telling about how you can get it up and running. As you can see here, I already got a web API. I've actually created a load generator, so it will pull our API every now and then. It's a standard API with some extra things added. As you can see in the description, you have to actually add these two methods for AspNetCore to make a default endpoint for getting metrics. So if I try to just run it so you can see it first, I'll just run web and it's starting up. So if I go to /metrics here, you can actually see that the API has been called once. Actually twice it says. It's actually because the browser sometimes called a website before it's actually pressed enter. So we can already see here that it's been called once, and it returned not found because it was just on the default. We can see how long the request in average took. So the first one took less than 1 millisecond, and the second one took less than 2 milliseconds. So that's pretty quick, but yeah, it's localhost. So if we actually go keep this and make a new one and call that /weather forecast, we actually get a, okay, we can just take this first. I have inserted an exception, so every now and then an exception will be thrown. So if I just press F5 and go back to the API, it actually shouldn't do it again. So I can call it a couple of times. So if I just make it fail one more time, yeah, that was another failure. So if I go back to the browser again and go into the metrics, I should actually see we have 2 exceptions and a lot of success calls. So I can see here's my average times for success, and I also have average times for failures, and they're taking actually slightly longer time. And that's pretty normal for failures because you have to get a stack trace and all that. And plus I had a debugger attached that I had to continue from. So already now we have some pretty good metrics for the web API. And here I have made some custom metrics, a total count of requests. I'll show you the code for that so you can build your own metrics as well, other than the default metrics. And then there's stuff like RAM and CPU usage. So that's some basic metrics you can have. Other than that, you can make your own metrics, but let's just start out with this. So I just go inside the code and press stop again. We can see I have a default weather API with some edit logic that 5% of the time I'll just go boom and catch an exception, and then the metrics will just log it as an exception call. This is not a logging system, this is a metric system, so we do not care about logging the exception, what kind of exceptions it is. You could if you want, but in my example we're not interested. So if you're going to watch the code itself, you actually need to add 2 packages, Prometheus.net and Prometheus AspNetCore. And you need to add them to your startup. So if you go in here, you can add the metric server. It will just give you an endpoint for metrics, and it will give you base metrics like CPU, RAM usage and all that kind of stuff. Then I've added HTTP metrics, which actually catches all calls to my controllers, so I don't have to make a custom middleware to catch those and log them. And then I have my own here, just a small demo example, how I can actually log some custom request middleware as well. So if I just go to that, we can see it's just a middleware I've created, and it looks like this. When anything is being called, I take the path, I take the method, I create a new metric counter. In this example, it's Prometheus demo request as I showed before, and it's just total. So every time somebody calls, I'll just actually increment by 1, unless the path is metrics, because I don't really want to count how many times anybody calls my metrics. You could do the same if you had an heartbeat endpoint. You can just say disregard that. I'm not really interested to count how many times that's being called, because that's most likely Docker or Kubernetes or something else just taking up that everything's running as expected. So this is just a custom middleware. You can make your own middleware where you check for something else. You can also actually push other stuff like sales, views, average response times, all kind of different stuff. It's just up to you to make your own logic in here. But as you can see in startup, it's actually pretty simple. There are some special cases that you need to be aware of. I've marked it here. It's just when an exception is cast, if you have this before, it will disregard all path and stuff you have done, so you have to have this afterwards you have done this. Normally that will be in the start. In my example, I've disabled HTTPS redirection because I didn't want to work with certificates and all that kind of stuff, so it's just for debugging. Other than that, it's pretty simple, normal starter API. Oh, you can see I have some old comments here, but yeah. So now we have the metrics, but the metrics in themselves are not actually that useful because every time I stop my service, this is removed. It's just stored in memory, so we have to have Prometheus to scrape it and actually store it. And for that I'm using Docker. So if I go in here, just mix this down, I can see in here I have a Docker Compose that actually spins my service up, and it also makes a load generator that just pulls my web API. I have Prometheus. So if we look at the Prometheus configuration, it's totally basic. I say every 10 seconds, check for updated metrics and then save them. And I'm just pointing to my server. In here you can point at several servers, or you can point at one. You can also point at different services, so it doesn't have to be the same, so you can store all kind of different metrics in here. So if we go back to the Docker Compose, I also have a Grafana Dashboard. It's actually just to make a better overview of the metrics that are being gathered, because Prometheus itself is actually not that pretty, and it's not that nice to work with. It does one thing, and it does one thing well, and the same can be said for Grafana. So those two combined is actually pretty awesome. So if I go out to the console, let's say Docker Compose up, it actually creates all this, and you can see my load generator is actually already starting, create a lot of load, and every now and then an exception is being thrown. So if I go into the browser and now say localhost again, metrics. Oh yeah, sorry, it's without HTTPS this time, so if I just go like this, I can actually see now it's actually already done 225 requests in less than a millisecond. And every now and then I get some exceptions that takes a little more time. I can see my custom middleware still counting 231 and 7 for the exceptions. If you see up here, it's actually also making a total in the built-in, so this was just an example of how to build custom middleware. So that's the weather API up and running. So if we go to 1990, that's Prometheus. So Prometheus is actually pulling my metric endpoint and updating its internal database. So if I go in here and say like, how much RAM does my machine use? Then I just get some weird number that I don't really need for anything. So if I find my custom middleware, just a moment. Here, execute, I can actually see all the endpoints. 1 not found, 813 for the normal, and 28 failed. And yeah, this is actually not pretty nice. I can make a graph, but it's not nice. It would be better to use Grafana for that. So if I go to port, I think it's 3000 as far as I remember. I get the Grafana dashboard. If you look in my Docker Compose, I've just set default username and password to admin, so admin, log in. If you want to change your password, I'll just put admin again, because I don't really want to change it. I could have pressed skipped. Don't save. So now I have Grafana up and running, but I don't have any dashboards and I don't have any data sources, so I can just start adding a data source. So I have to click data source. I actually have Prometheus here, so I can just put in http://prometheus/9090, and Prometheus is actually the website because it's running inside a Docker network. So we have that, and I can actually say save and test, and it's a working data source, so that's nice. So now I have a data source, but I actually also need to have some dashboards, and for that I'll import some already existing. So if I go into my code again, go into my readme, I found 2 dashboards that is set up to run out of the gate with the AspNetCore. So if I go down here, we can see the steps we've already done, configure, and the 2 imported dashboards I want to show is this one. Whoops. So if I copy this number, go back again, I can just say import, oops, like this, load, and the default name of it is Prometheus.net. I'll just keep the name. You can find a lot of different dashboards in the grafana.com store, but the 2 ones I've chosen is most ideal for AspNetCore. So I'll just pick a data source, it's Prometheus. You can have a lot of different data sources, but for my example I only have this one. So I'll press import, and you can see the dashboard right here. I'll just go ahead and import the second one as well. Import, and just find the ID. And you can see it's a controller summary, so I'll just import that one as well. So now I have these 2 dashboards. I can see that right now it's running with 9.9 requests per second, and that's it's about 10 requests per second I've set it up for, but there's some delay and stuff, so that's pretty nice. I can see I have a heat map or how long the requests are, but right now it's not been running for that long. So if I go in here and say like the last 5 minutes, we can see it starting ramping up. You can see it, most of our requests is coming in on below 1 millisecond, but we also have some that's a bit slower. In a production environment there'll be a bit more all over the place, but this is just to give an overview that most of your requests should lay in the lower end and then some in the high end. If a lot of requests start laying in the high end, then you know there's something wrong, because then something is going really slow in your system and you need to figure out. Then you can go back in time and say, okay, at what point did that happen? You can also say, okay, auto refresh every 10 seconds. I know that Prometheus pulse at 10 seconds, so this will be a good setting. So every 10 seconds I will just go ahead and update this dashboard. And you saw it just jump there. You can see the error rate as well. It's going like a bit up and down. So if this starts to go out of rises a lot, then you know you have some problems as well. But right now it's like 0.4% error rate, and I've set it to 5%, so that's okay. So if you go back and look at the other dashboard, and again say like the last 5 minutes, and refresh every 10 seconds, then we can actually see here that we have a pretty stable duration of HTTP requests, so that's nice. We want that. If this starts to spike, it might be because you get a lot of visitors. It might not be a problem, but it's just a good dashboard to show how your API is doing. I can see the start time of the API. This number is currently not being set by AspNetCore, but that's because it's not supported right now. I can see the number of threads that's used. I can see the allocated memory of my API. So it's a lot of good numbers to know for my API. So I can also, if I had more APIs, I could start saying I only want to see this one, but in this example I only have one. So that's pretty much it. With this you have a small demo showing how AspNetCore can collect metrics, and you can have a nice dashboard. And Grafana has a lot of nice features, like you can have this in a kiosk mode, so you can have it on the screen and then it could toggle dashboards in a like circular list, so it keeps showing different things every 5 minutes, so you don't have to manually go up and change it. And you can see that it's refreshing every now and then and giving me some new numbers. So it's playlist, the name of the feature to change dashboards automatically. If I go back in here, it's like 5 minutes again. You can see it's still pretty stable with the error rate, number of requests I'm receiving, and most of my requests are still coming in below 1 millisecond. But we can still see that going a bit up, there's still some requests that's a bit slower, but not slow at all. Going all the way up to 33 seconds. At that point, you really have a problem. But it's just a heat map to like signal, okay, how bad is this going, or how good is it going. So that's pretty much all you need for getting Prometheus up and running with AspNetCore. And Prometheus is more or less the default tool that people work with Kubernetes. So that's all for this time. I hope you enjoyed it, and peace out.